Hi everyone! Today I'm making an ink and watercolor painting and I'll talk through my process and the supplies I use. Before talking about the inking and painting supplies, let's start with the sketch. I first made a freehand sketch in my sketchbook with a colored pencil and I used a reference photo, but I simplified some parts, especially because this is a small painting, so I didn't need that much detail in the background and so on. I decided to transfer the sketch straight from the sketchbook onto a piece of watercolor paper, and I used 300 GSM watercolor paper from this large paper block and cut a postcard sized piece from it because this was a birthday card for my grandmother. I have smaller paper blocks, but I used this one because it's the thickest and it will buckle the least. I taped the watercolor paper on the back of the sketchbook page and placed a small graphite transfer paper in between them and redrew the sketch with a ballpoint pen so I'd easily see which parts I've already transferred. I quickly figured out that the sketchbook page was too thick to transfer through, so I will not do that again. I tried a colored transfer paper first and nothing transferred. Then I switched to a black one and pressed the ballpoint pen really hard on the paper, and it did transfer faint lines. Because the transfer didn't work that well, I ended up making some inking mistakes later. I really like the combination of ink lines and watercolor, but I didn't used to have waterproof ink pens, so if I tried inking and painting watercolor over it, the ink would run on the paper. So I'd either have to paint watercolor first and ink second, or ink with my acrylic ink and a dip pen, in which case the lines would be thicker than I wanted them to be. One of the reasons I want to ink first is that I can scan the line art before painting and turn it into a coloring page. So I finally bought a set of Sakura Pigma Micron fineliners last month. They have waterproof archival ink, which means that you can paint over them with watercolor and also that they will not fade in sunlight. This set has 6 fineliners in different tip sizes from 0.2 mm to 0.5 mm, so you can also vary your line thickness to make the piece more interesting and accentuate some parts of the line art. After I was done with the inking, I taped the paper down onto this piece of hardboard. I painted over the ink lines with my Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolor set. I added shading and details by layering the watercolor. I started with light washes of watered down paints and painted new layers of more concentrated colors after those were dry. You can also add little drops of color into wet parts and let the colors blend together. Sometimes you might think you painted some part too dark, but don't panic, just let it dry and it will probably look a lot lighter once it's dry. The building I'm painting here is actually our summer cottage, and it was the first idea that came to my mind when I realized I needed to make this birthday card. I've been wanting to practice drawing and painting buildings lately, and I didn't plan on the dog to be in the painting, but he happened to be in the photo I found, so I thought, why not? I do like to include 1 or 2 animals in landscape paintings anyway. I've been watching a lot of videos by Casey Golden and Minnie Small lately, and they both do ink pen and watercolor paintings, so their videos inspired me to buy these micron fineliners and start making quick small paintings like this. Before this painting, I had just made a couple of acrylic paintings, the tarot card and the sunset landscape painting, and they took a long time to paint, so this felt so easy compared to those. I made this in one evening and didn't have to worry about washing my paint palette or brushes afterwards. Of course I rinsed the brushes in water, but it's a lot easier to wash off watercolor than acrylic or oil. As I said before, I made a few mistakes with the inking, One of them was continuing the line of the tree trunk on the second tree from the left, because I thought it was part of the house. I decided to cover it up by adding a shadow in front of the tree, so the mistake is less obvious. The house is also a bit crooked, and I wish I had used masking fluid to mask out some flowers in front of the house. Now I just added a few dots of red on the green, and they don't really stand out or look like flowers. But other than that, I think this painting turned out cute, and I want to paint more buildings with this technique. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe for more art tips and speed paintings like this. I post a new video every Friday and sometimes an extra video on Tuesday.